Hi, everybody. Thank you for staying. We've had some amazing talks tonight. And I am here to tell you a little bit about bubbles. So, most are familiar with the concept of a bubble, whether it is mistakes that we made in our youth, thinking that Beanie Babies were going to be valuable and give us a retirement in our 40s. Currently, mistakes we're making now. Mistakes that none of you in this room made, I'm sure, because you were all my friends. And mistakes that we as a society kind of still feel bad about. Now, there are other bubbles that have existed that have not involved cute animals in compromising situations. For example, Venice in 1340 decided to crash the market in Florence because they were Venice and they could get away with that, and those Florentines were up to no good. Generally, being a Florentine means you're up to no good. Look up at what to Florentine somebody means when you get home tonight. It's exciting. The Romans, yeah, it does not involve spinach. I'm sorry to tell you, but I'm actually not sorry to tell you because you're about to have a revelation. So long after the housing crash of 33 and the Silphium, were the extinction event in the hundreds, the Romans still hadn't learned their lesson, and they had a run on grain in the 2nd century. And they were trading on grain futures, and they caused their entire market to collapse again. The Romans just can't seem to keep anything going. But, of course, the most famous speculative bubble, not the first one, as you all see, anybody who says that is completely full of bullshit. But the most famous speculative bubble of our time was, of course, the Dutch's run on tulips, tulip mania. There are so many paintings about tulip mania and making fun of tulip mania. It's a wealth of Wikipedia. So here's one where they're showing the tulips in these nice orderly rows, and these, kind of stern-looking folks are staring down at them, kind of wondering if they made all the wrong choices. So the tulip is quintessentially Dutch, but it's not from Europe at all. This is absolutely a map, everybody, yes. So tulips originally from the Tian Shan Mountains in Kyrgyzstan, which is really far away from both Amsterdam and Istanbul, which is where tulips came to Europe from most recently. So we're talking like about 5,000 miles. There are lots of varieties of wild tulips. So this is what tulips look like in the Tian Shan Mountains. Most of the wild tulips today are still in that area. There is one that is wild in Greece, and that might have been around even when the Dutch were first realizing that tulips were a thing. This is the last time that European tulips are going to actually show up in this talk, because these Turkish ones were what was all the rage. So everything that purple one in the bottom corner is a Turkish tulip. And the Turkish actually like long, skinny tulips. If you look at Turkish Airways, you can see kind of that symbol on their flag is actually based on the old tulips. So the Ottomans really, really into tulips. You find them on their turbans. You find them in the mosaics in their buildings. And this guy, Ogier Gislan Dibasbak, is hanging out in Turkey and is really excited to send samples of these flowers to his friend Carolus Clusius back in Holland. Somewhere the name gets lost in translation. So in Turkish, there's lale and the turban. So there are two different schools of thought on this. Either it was the shape of the turban, which is unlikely because, again, Turkish tulips are pointy, or the Turks wore these tulips in their turbans. But anyways, the word tulip actually comes from the Turkish word for turban. Now, I digress, which is going to happen a lot. I am sorry. There's good stuff here. There's too much good stuff here. There are too many talks wrapped up in this one. But Carolus Clusius, now he's a botanist, and he noticed this flower. He thought it was gorgeous. He started growing it. Now, I could say that he was growing it because he was a botanist and he was trying to do science, but he was really trying to impress a girl. So this girl absolutely deserves her own talk. This is Marie de Brimo, the Princess of Chimay, who became an independently wealthy lady in 1630s after divorcing the Prince of Chimay after he converted to Catholicism. She kept the money, she kept the title, and she kept the house. Right? And she independently started writing letters in the vernacular to scientists of her day and getting replies. So before this time, most of these letters were written in Latin. Latin was the language of science. But she was actually one of the first people to bring the Republic of Letters into the vernacular and open it up to people who were not classically educated. She was amazing. She noticed that, so actually after Danielle's talk, I'm like, oh, what does tulip mean? I probably should know this. Oh, okay, so I saw that it was perfect. Fame also works. So even though like we have these ideas about the tulip being this kind of like, like perfect, famous entity, in the Dutch Times, and what Marie noticed was that some of them broke. Some of them had these variegated patterns. They weren't perfect. And so Carolus started growing these in his garden. The Dutch went crazy about these. So the tulip mania was based almost entirely around these variegated or broken tulips. Now, okay, set the stage. It's 1635. The Dutch are, as they say, rolling in it. The East India Company, if you've heard of that little thing, has started to come in. Yes, they suck. The owners of the East India Company lost a ton of money on tulips, by the way, so that'll make you all very, very happy. Because, it was full, like Amsterdam at the time was full of people who were high on trade. They'd made a bunch of money, a bunch of dudes. Sorry, it was all dudes. They had a fortune. They wanted to figure out how to make more fortune because that's all they knew how to do. And so they started speculating on tulips. Because tulips, especially these stripy ones, turned out to be difficult to propagate. So tulips come out of bulbs. And if you grow them from seed, they take 6 years. But if you grow them out of bulbs, they come up every year from offsets of these bulbs. Don't ask me how this works. I am not a botanist, nor am I any good at plants. But it turns out these stripy bulbs, these broken tulips, their offsets did not consistently produce stripy tulips. And when they did, the offsets were weaker. So now we have an asset that is rare and really, really loved, to the point where this gorgeous flower, the Semper Augustus, was incredibly valuable. So only 12 of them were ever thought to exist. The dude that owned most of them was, in fact, a big shot in the East India Company. The top bulb was sold for about 5,000 guilders, which is about the equivalent of $700,000 in purchasing power today. For one bulb, one bulb that may or may not have been a stripy tulip. Because remember, you're speculating on these things before they sprout, which is insane. So your typical tulip was about 40,000. So people were kind of crazy with all of this money. And they were really excited to see kind of what their money could get them. In a way, this was nature's loot box. This was the first time when people had this obsession with opening something and seeing what it would be. So we have this speculative market with this rare edition. Now, of course, when you have something like a stripy tulip, you're like, okay, well, how do we make sure that the tulip ends up stripy and our investment doesn't go down the toilet? People tried a lot of things. So they tried putting oxbloods, which is incredibly hard to Google for an image of, by the way. So oxblood ink is what you get. Sorry, RIP my search history. People put oxblood and chalk to try to make the Semper Augustus flower. They put pigeon shit down. They tied flowers together. They did all sorts of crazy things to try to make these stripy tulips happen. So, They figured out eventually to stop trying to make stripy tulips a thing, but it took a bit. All right, so it took another badass female botanist to figure this out. This is Dorothy Cayley. In the early 1900s, she realized that the striping was caused by something called the tulip breaking virus. So this is the rotavirus. There is science, yes. She was on a minor studentship in Sri Lanka when she figured this out, and she was the only woman presenting at the symposium where she showed that this was, in fact, caused very likely by this tulip-breaking virus, which was getting to the infected bulbs with this thing, the Mysius persicae, the peach aphid. So there's a whole class of these virae. They're carried by bugs like aphids. The tobacco virus is the one that's the biggest concern today. Anyways, digressing. So, your next question might be, well, a virus. How does a virus do this? I'm so glad you asked. Right? Thank you, thank you. How does a virus do this? The answers are anthomycin and Alan Turing. Yes, that Alan Turing. So, a tulip is actually always yellow or white, which I found out when working on this talk. The laid-on color on top is created by this chemical here, anthocyanin, which is a flavonoid. It's why blueberries are blue and red cabbages are red, and other flowers are dark colors. It's why some of the leaves that turn red kind of turn that red purplish hue. Anyways, digression. So, where does Alan Turing come into this? So there's this idea of Turing instabilities. So if you think about like the patterning on a pufferfish or the stripes on a zebra, the way those colors diffuse is caused by two chemicals moving at slightly different rates. And within that variation, you get these patterns. And this paper from 2025, Wang et al., provides one theory as to how this diffusion between the anthocyanin coming in and essentially blocking the substrate on these petals to create these variegation creates these patterns. And so they model, this is a computer simulation, modeling tulip-like petals. So we're pretty sure this is it. I mean, it's been a mystery for 350 years, so it is something clearly that, it was good that Dorothy Cayley figured this out. The same pattern shows up in watermelon, and you'll see this in like rose leaves. Rhododendron do crazy things. And then you know the rest, right? So eventually they figured out to stop breaking tulips and having that be a thing. So the fanciest tulips disappeared because their offsets got too weak. They went extinct. Semper Augustus is very extinct. The bulbs got too expensive. The market fell out. And now anything that's a broken tulip is actually illegal in Holland and must be destroyed because now they value these beautiful, perfect, famous flowers. The Dutch are into mockery for the next 500 years. Broken tulips are a symbol now, or tulipmania is a symbol of market speculation everywhere. They had paintings. Their most famous painter, this is Bruegel, right? Like he's supposed to be on their side, and he painted them all as monkeys. I could summarize this whole talk but I'll let this poem do it for me. There are a lot of moving parts to the story of how aphids caused tulip mania. I'm not going to read this to you. But stepping back, I would like to point out that none of what we know about how tulips work would have been possible without badass lady botanists. So, I'd like to toast the Princess of Chimay and Dorothy Cayley, Lady Botanist of Wonder.